Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to episode two of Nerd Shit. See, already fucking up. Can't speak English today. My summer term ended yesterday. Took my last final, so I finally get 6 weeks off. It's been a rough year in terms of school, but we're chugging along. No complaining, no excuses. So on this episode of Nerd Shit, what we're going to talk about is the cardiovascular system and its importance of keeping it in, and sort of the adaptations that occur from cardiovascular training, and why even in the off season when you're pushing your weight up, if not promote better cardiovascular health, at least maintain it and the long-term benefits that come from it, at least in the bodybuilding sense, because that's the audience that I'm speaking to. If we're speaking to marathon runners, it's going to be a totally different conversation because the training is going to be radically different. So let's begin with a little bit of minutia. Well, not necessarily minutia, a little bit of physiology like I did with the muscle when I talked about the different fiber types, so on and so forth. So obviously with the cardiovascular system, you have the heart and you have the transport vessels. You have like the arteries, the arterioles, you have the capillaries, you have the venules, the veins. And basically the main purpose of the heart is to pump blood. That's what it is. It's basically this fucking muscular pump, and you have basically the left side which pumps blood into the arteries and transports oxygenated blood to the muscles, organs, and various other tissues, and then you have the veins which transport semi-deoxygenated blood. It's not 100% deoxygenated. The amount of oxygen that's offloaded depends on exercise intensity, and we can measure this via an oxygen dissociation curve. You don't need to understand what that is. It really doesn't matter, but anyways, more oxygen is delivered to the muscles during physical activity than at rest. That's all you need to know. So it's very common for bodybuilders in the off season to just totally get lazy and just let the wheels fall off the bus, and then their conditioning and everything else tends to suffer. And when I talk about their conditioning, I'm not just talking about how fat they get, but I'm also talking about their ability to perform work will obviously decline, because the limiting factor is you literally cannot oxygenate your body. Your breathing rate is very erratic, and various other things as well. So the reason why bodybuilders forego cardio training in the off season, because the idea is you're trying to gain weight. Gaining weight is a balance between how many calories you consume versus how many calories you burn. Sometimes the amount of calories you consume becomes so high that it's to the point of being uncomfortable, where you're force feeding yourself. So it's a compromise where it's like, I will just decrease the amount of physical activity that I perform. Though this is obviously a workable strategy, it's something that in the long run can negatively affect your health too as well. We won't get into that too much. So we're going to talk a little bit about the positive adaptations that occur from cardiovascular training. And really this occurs with any type of cardiovascular training, despite the fact that if you specialize in it or not. So bodybuilders would also reap these benefits, but also the applications, like the frequency, the duration, the intensity. So you know that you're doing something in a productive way that's not going to interfere with what your long-term goals are, which is to get fucking huge and jacked. So when we're talking about cardiovascular training, we're talking about basically 3 benefits that can occur. Number 1, increased mitochondrial density. So mitochondria are these organelles that are within the cell that basically are the powerhouse of the cell. They're what create energy in the form of ATP. Like they'll take protein, carbohydrates, and fat, break it down, and basically produce ATP. And the amount of ATP depends on the fuel substrate, but we won't get into that. That's for another nerd shit talk. But with increased mitochondrial density, what you'll have is an increase to break down substrate and produce fuel. Thus, you'll be able to use more energy and, I guess you can say burn it off. So if you're somebody who is, getting fat and everything else, and you find it's hard to lose fat, having increased mitochondria will definitely help with that. Adaptation number 2, increased capillary density. Now, obviously, capillaries is where oxygen and nutrients are transported to the muscles, basically like via gradients. Oxygen is transported through the capillaries, or blood is transported, oxygenated blood is transported through the capillaries. So with increased capillary density, what you'll have is an increase of oxygen and nutrients being delivered to the muscles, which is obviously important because the more we can saturate our muscles with nutrients, we'll have increased recoverability, increased work output, and just overall performance will go up in general. Last adaptation that occurs from cardiovascular training is an increase in lipolytic enzymes. Now, this may or may not occur from, with bodybuilder training. Like, I'm not sure if I have to look at the research, if there's something that really only occurs when you're doing a ton of cardiovascular training, but it does occur with cardiovascular training. And lipolytic enzymes are the things that are basically going to, increase the process of breaking down fat to be used as energy, which obviously mean that you'll be burning more fat per se. So, 3 adaptations: increase mitochondrial density, increase capillary density, and increase in lipolytic enzymes. Why does this matter for a bodybuilder? Well, what's one of the hardest things for a bodybuilder to do? What's the process? It's not really eating per se. It's not training hard. What it is getting stage lean. It's a battle. That's why a lot of bodybuilders use drugs to basically assist with this effect. And a lot of these drugs mimic the effects that occur from those positive adaptations from, training in an aerobic manner. So, if you're trying to get as lean as possible and you're in the off season, obviously you don't want to get too fat, but you also want to promote processes that will make it easier to get leaner in the long run. And another indirect way is obviously if you have a efficient cardiovascular training or system, you can train harder, you can train longer, and you can train and you recover much more quickly. But this is obviously going to be something that everyone wants. I mean, they take all these bullshit supplements to help with recovery. Why not just build up your cardiovascular system to where you can recover much greater? That's the reason why in athletic training, post-surgery, post-injury, the first thing we start doing is we start people exercising. Why? To increase blood flow. It's one of the greatest things you can do for, recovery. So just make sure that you're keeping that in mind as well. Don't let the limiting factor in your workouts be how fit you are. Always try to maintain a high level of fitness that doesn't interfere with what your long-term goals are, Running, how long it takes you to run 6 miles may not necessarily help you be the best bodybuilder there is, but just being able to maintain a base level of fitness to where you can get through your workouts and be healthy and your heart works well and oxygen is being delivered and we're creating that pumping mechanism via the venous pumps, then you're good. Now, we'll talk a little bit of applications now. How often should you be doing it? Now, once you start to cross over into the realm of specialization, your body will adapt. That's why this old saying, train the way you want to look. If you do a ton of cardio training, you're going to look like a marathon runner. Some are rail thin, some aren't. Some actually have some muscularity to them, but they're not insanely muscular. And the reason why is because these large, robust muscle fibers, an increase in cross-sectional area, is not very efficient for oxygen delivery. Smaller muscle fibers are. Also, there's a bias towards the type of fibers being trained. So when you do a ton of cardiovascular training, what fibers are probably most likely going to be used? The slow twitch fibers, which have the poorest growth potential. And in the long run, some of the fast twitch fibers can take on slow twitch characteristics, and it's a bitch to reverse. So we want to make sure that we're not getting to the realm of specialization. So I will say this: I think 45 minutes should be your ceiling for most people. If it's low intensity, steady state, you can do an hour, especially if you're knee deep in a prep and you're really trying to get chiseled, that's fine. In the off season, I think 20 to 30 minutes should suffice, 3 days a week at max. Because at the end of the day, there's only so much food you can eat. And if you're say for example me, I'm 222 right now, the goal is to be 250. And then I find myself, I do cardio and the next day I'm 4 pounds lighter. Obviously not 4 pounds of fat, but I'm 4 pounds lighter. That's a problem, so I want to make sure that, okay, I'm doing 30 minutes, I'll just take it down to 20 minutes, because I do want to do some aerobic training, but I don't want to do so much to where I'm burning a crazy amount of calories as well. So 20 to 30 minutes is the maximum frequency would be anywhere from 2 to 3 days a week. Intensity, if you use the RPE scale, it could be anywhere from 4 to 6. You should be able to talk and maintain a conversation while you're doing it. Like I said, it's low intensity, steady state. Obviously, the higher you go up, the more your breathing rate increases. This is something that can obviously negatively affect recovery. So if you're using maximal heart rate training, anywhere from 55 to 75% of your maximal heart rate should suffice, and that's it. If you're getting ready for a prep and you're getting ready for a show, you're obviously going to have to use your judgment. Some people don't do any cardio. They just have a step goal where their non-exercise activity thermogenesis is so high that they really, it's superfluous at that point. But I would recommend, instead of doing more per session, just do more sessions per week and just keep the duration low. So instead of doing like an hour 4 days a week, I would do 30 minutes every day. Same rules apply, low intensity, 4 to 6 on the RPE scale, anywhere from 55 to 75% of your maximal heart rate. As the body fat starts to get a little bit more stubborn and it starts, like I said, coming off less and less, barring that you're looking at other things like your caloric intake, your step goal, how physically active you are, and various other things. And if you're an enhanced athlete, your drug selection, you can increase it. Obviously, I would do this very systematically and progressively from 30 to 35 minutes per week. Because you got to also look at like 5 minutes extra on a workout, throughout the week is literally like an extra half an hour a week. And then you can bump it up to, 40 minutes and then 45. Honestly, I don't like to go any higher than that, because then you start getting into the realm where if you are actually training like a honest to goodness bodybuilder hard, you shouldn't be able to do much more than 45 minutes. And that's just my opinion from all the people that I've trained and understanding how recovery works. However, if you are a freak and you were a former athlete before and 60 minutes doesn't do anything to you, then go crazy. As long as you're not interfering with your overall recovery. So just make sure that you're looking at those things. So quick recap on the video. For Nerd Shit, we talked a little bit about the physiology of the cardiovascular system, the positive adaptations that do occur from having an efficient cardiovascular system, and why that matters to you as a bodybuilder, and the application of how to basically approach it. That way you don't just go in there like, oh, Rocco said you should do cardio, so I'm going to do like 2 hours a day, and next thing you know, in like 2 weeks, you're just totally off the program because you're burnt out. Everything is person to person dependent, so some people need less, some people need more. It really just comes down to each individual looking at their progress, being able to look at all the other metrics as well. But that's another video for another day. This is your second episode of Nerd Shit for you guys, talking about the cardiovascular system. Take care and have a great day.